I do not want to comment.
Je me suis donné toutes les réponses dont j'avais besoin.
C'est la Fashion Week?
Ils se mettent sur le trottoir, les fashion.
What are those? Dior clothes.
It's fashion art. Dude, fashion is hard work, gritty, it's not glamorous.
Okay, you know now, les dés sont jetés. It means like, what can happen, you know?
That's all.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us here in Marrakech at your home, your lovely home.
Thank you.
We're going to spend some time together talking about your life, your career, your experiences. We'll start with a very simple question. Who are you? First, can you introduce yourself?
Who am I?
Yes.
Who am I? That's a really good question.
Where did it all start? Like, where are you born?
I'm American. And I grew up in a very small rural town in Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And I think there was maybe like 100,000 people that lived there. But we actually lived on a farm. I grew up on a farm. I am the only person that went to university in my family. My father was, he built houses for a living. My grandfather, they were masonry workers. And I just kind of grew up in this way that felt very foreign to me. In other words, I never felt I fit in even from when I was born. You understand? Like I was in a family that was very different from me. I felt very different. And by that, I mean just the way I saw things, the way I saw life, what I wanted to do. And my earlier years were very informed by nature. I spent a lot of time because we lived kind of literally in the middle of just the countryside on a dirt road. So I spent a large portion of my childhood, like in the summers, whatever, just out in the woods. My cousins lived down the road, so we just kind of, I don't know, just spent our days sitting in treetops, just doing nothing, really. And I always feel like, as a child, and as I have two kids, boredom is something that's very important.
Yes.
Because I think it allows you your imagination to kind of become more active, and you can imagine. You know, I would daydream for hours when I was a kid, just laying in the grass or whatever. Just, you know, it was crazy. Now, when you think about it, because my kids are all on iPads and, you know, and I always try to tell them, like, you should spend time, you know, outside, and it's a very different world. But when I was growing up, nature was something that was very, very important to me.
But now companies, they want this time, you know, they want the time that kids should be spending, like you say, daydreaming or something, that's real estate, how they say for now. So they want to put this time into advertising, the younger, the better. So they're already like, okay, this is like a market to them. So everybody's, like you were saying with your kids, they're on iPads, and like the time consuming is really like the key things that all brands want. So we're not like, it's not the same. I grew up like you, like my father's is an agricultural guy. So I grew up also like you, and you spend time getting bored, but like now kids, they don't have this luxury anymore.
No.
Because everybody's on their time. They want their, you know, they want to get inside as soon as possible.
When everyone is so plugged in, you know, we're all plugged into a phone, to something. And at that time, there was nothing to plug into, you know. What you plugged into was like, I mean, we had livestock, chickens, I had a horse, I was with my animals. It was quite idyllic. You know, I'm very fortunate to have had that. And even at that time, I felt fortunate. You know, it wasn't like I was like, you know, what am I doing? Like, it was that came later. But when I was, I would say up in through high school, I was very happy to just where I lived. We were not rich. You know, we didn't go on holidays in the summer. You were just home and you just had to figure it out. You know, you just had to make it work for you, like whatever that was. And then I got a summer job when I was younger and to have extra money. So I started working at a very young age. I started working, I think I was 14. I was working. My cousin and I had a lawn mowing service. And then when I got into high school, I worked as a waiter in a restaurant, and I spent a lot, you know, because there was no extra cash, so it was basically like, if you want extra money, then you're gonna have to make it. And I think that's very important because it teaches you from a young age how you can be independent, and you know.
Teaches you the value of money.
The value, yeah, I was never great with money. Even to this day, I can't sit here and tell you like, you know, I'm the best with it. But I knew that if I wanted something, I had to earn it. I knew that was the only option. You know, I didn't have other options. And sometimes when you don't have other options, it forces you to kind of, I don't know, into a clarity of learning how to survive, how to, you know, for instance, when you learn that you can work and take care of yourself, you feel you can go anywhere in the world. You know, you can make it happen anywhere. I never felt like, how am I going to do this? You know, I never had a fear about being able to take care of myself. I was kind of fearless like that. I just knew I could. And so in Hot Springs, I stayed there until I finished high school, and after that I worked for a year waiting tables in my hometown, and then I went to college. I went to university the year after that, to the University of Arkansas, which is in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I majored in. I have a BA in fine art. I was, you know, so I really was an artist from the beginning.
Yeah. And how was school for you? What type of student were you?
I was a very, you know, I was not the best student, like academically, which had nothing to do with my intelligence. It had more to do with the drama and trauma of my family, because there was a lot of trauma, you know, just a lot of shit happening in my family. So I was very preoccupied. So it was very hard for me. But at the same time, I mean, my grades were okay. They could have been much better. I feel like if I were to go back to school now, I would have probably done a lot better. But I always had a love for art, and I basically went to school to be a painter. I mean, that's what I was always obsessed with. And after I finished school, I had always wanted to move to New York, which is very strange when you consider where I come from. You know, I didn't come from the East Coast. I mean, I literally came from next to Texas, okay? And where I lived, if you ever went to a city, you would go to Dallas or you would go to Atlanta. You know, I remember my grandfather, I told him I was planning to move to New York, and he was like, but why would you? You know, New York was this foreign, weird, it was like going to another planet. You know, where I was from, no one knew anything about it. It would just look scary. Everyone just thought it was this scary, dangerous place. And
it was dangerous back in the time.
Well, I moved to New York in 1986, but I never even thought about that. You know, I was just like, it was just the place I knew I needed to go. I didn't know why. I didn't know. I didn't have a job. I knew no one. But I've always been very good at recognizing my instincts and going with what my instinct tells me. It's been kind of the thing that saved me in many situations. I just knew in my instinct that's where I needed to be. And I trusted that.
So you followed your gut.
Yeah, always. I mean, I've done that my whole life. And it's just been the one thing. You know, because if I ask you your opinion, you're going to give me your opinion. I mean, you're going to give me, you know, and that all comes from people's own projection onto what that is and what it means. So at the end of the day, it's really about your own, you have to sit with yourself and know, you know. And the great thing about that, I think even when I was young, I thought, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? You know, it's a nightmare, it's horrible, and I have to go back home. And I thought, I'm never doing that, so I'm going to make sure this works. So I moved to New York. I think I had like $1,500 to my name, and I had a one-way ticket to New York. And I had a friend that lived in New York, who said, very kindly said, you know, you can stay on his couch, you know, until you find a place. And I mean, it really is that story, you know, it's like a movie. And I remember I got on the plane. I think I arrived into New York. Now you have to understand, I'd never been to a big city ever. I mean, I really haven't. You know, I was a kid from like the countryside. And I arrived into New York City and it was like 1 o'clock at night. I don't know why it was so late. Maybe the flight was late. So you take a taxi. I didn't even know where I'm going. You know, I had an address. I literally had a piece of paper with an address. And I thought, I didn't know anything. And the first thing I noticed was how, you know, in New York, there's all those grates that they pull down at night on the... And I thought, my God, it looks like a prison. You know, I'd never seen so much. I mean, where I lived, you didn't lock your doors at night, you know. So it was really shocking. I was like, wow, this is interesting. Anyway, so I get to where I'm going, and this friend of a friend, he was a designer. And he lived in literally like a studio, I mean, really like the size of this, you know, like, I think the bathroom and the sink were kind of together. And there was just a bed and, you know, a closet. And the good thing about it, he had a tar roof, you know, like you could go out a door and there was a little rooftop, but it was just tar. I mean, there were no plants, nothing, but you could go outside. So I stayed there, and that's where I stayed. And he was really nice, and he let me stay there as long as I wanted. But the amazing thing is, the next morning, I'll never forget this, I go outside and I walk onto the street. You know, I hadn't seen New York in the day, and it was just the sea of people, you know, like on the sidewalk. Like, I remember you just would look, and it was just, and back then, you know, it was quite busy. I don't know how it is now. But it was literally just like people. And, you know, coming from a place where you see no one.
It's a shock. It
was a shock, but it was so exciting. And I remember at that time just feeling like I finally feel at home. Because New York is a place where I think a lot of people who were misfits in their own town, or, you know, very different in their own town, they go there. So you immediately feel like you can just do and be anyone, and you're anonymous. And when you grow up in a small town, everyone knows you from when you're born to, you know, so everyone knows everything. And it was just a relief to think, God, nobody knows me. It was really incredible, you know. I felt so excited. Anyway, that was in 1986. Then I found a job pretty fast as a waiter in this very trendy. Right then is when all this Japanese craze happened with like kombu garçon and like sushi, like this, you know, this is like the late 80s. like Charivari, you know, had like Yoji, and I mean, this, I didn't even know these people, but this is what was happening. You know, there was a big Japanese trend. And so I worked in this small but very trendy Japanese restaurant. These two amazing gay guys owned it, and they had, it was all boys that were waiters. So most of these kids were like my age, you know, fairly good looking, whatever. But they were there to be an actor, you know, it's like kids that came from wherever, you know, and they were all in New York to do something. And it was, so you had everyone coming in there. I mean, you had all celebrities, fashion. But at that time, I knew nothing about that world. You know, I moved to New York to be a painter.
Yeah, because your background was art, but it wasn't.
It wasn't fashion. Yeah. No. I mean, I knew a bit, like I've seen Vogue and, you know, these kind of magazines, but no, it was not my thing at all. I really was obsessed to be a painter. My idea was to move to New York to pursue my career as a painter, work until I'm 40 to make enough money, and then just live and call it a day. And at this restaurant, I think a year later, I met a lot of people. But I was never that, you know, I wasn't that person that was trying to, like, you know, meet people, network the room. Whenever anyone would ask me, oh, because everyone's asking you, like, well, why did you move to New York? You know, you're young, like, and I'm like, I'm a waiter. I mean, that's what I do. You know, I was giving nothing, you know, like, I'm not here to chit chat, like, I don't. But one night I met Beth Ann Hardison. She came in with, I think it was Azzedine Alaya. And they both said to me, oh, you know, have you ever, they asked my name, they were very nice. And they said, oh, have you ever thought to be a model? And I said, why would I think to do that? And I really was like, I didn't know, I was trying to understand why. And they said, no, you know, I said, no, I make really good money. I was making great money. I mean, it was a really good restaurant. You know, you could go home with like $400 in your pocket. You know, and I was living in like an apartment that cost me $300 a month. So I was good, you know, I was happy. I was, you know, going out. I was having a good time. I said, no, maybe you can make more money being a model. And I said, well, I don't know. I make really good money. So
what's the point?
Why am I going to do that? So Beth Ann gave me her card, and she's like, please think about it. If you change your mind, call me. And so
what made you change your mind?
I'm going to tell you. Because I had been waiting. I've been in food service, I mean, just since I was, 16. I mean, that's, I was a waiter, I was a busboy. That's how I made money during school. And I was really tired. I took a lot of pride in what I did, but I knew also when you become kind of bitter at doing something, you should change. And the problem with a lot of people I knew there, they made a very good living at being a waiter in New York City. But they were just bitter that they didn't go and do something else. And I thought, I don't want to be that person, so I called Beth Ann, and she introduced me. She was at Click at that time. And she introduced me to the woman who ran the men's division, Nadia Sherrick. And so I met Nadia, and I became a model, like, with Click. And then shortly after that, Nadia left Click and opened her own agency called Men. In the late 80s, it was not uncommon for people to just open a business in their apartment, creatively, so much was happening in New York in the late 80s. So she opened, like, she just decided she was going to do her own thing, and she opened this agency in her apartment on 12th Street and Broadway, and I became like a model with her. I was still having to wait tables at the same time because I was not making money that much. But I was also in the art scene. I was hanging out with a lot of, like, I mean, then it was just people I knew, like Keith Haring and Basquiat and all these, Glenn O'Brien. I mean, this whole art crowd of people. But at that time, you have to understand, they were not those people.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They were just, artists living downtown, and people were all kind of just there. And anyway, I didn't really like modeling, and I knew I was not vain enough to think that I was going to do that and make a lot of money, because I was not fitting the profile of what, and I just didn't like it. I don't understand how people could do something freelance. Like, it's just not these kind of, it makes me very nervous. Like,
especially, I think that at that time, the men's modeling part was really not bringing that much money, no? Because even now it's just picking up to the level of what women can do, but I can even imagine at that time the rates.
Well, I mean, it's all, for me, that industry has always been a women's industry. I mean, the men's, there is an industry, but and I knew so many boys that were so twisted because girls made more money, all this kind of thing. And I'm like, well, dude, like, it's a women's business. I mean, you don't have cosmetic contracts, you don't have hair care, look at it. So one day, Nadia, she had to go to Paris to the shows, and I think she had one booker, and something happened to the booker, and she was sick. And I said, well, I can answer the phones for you. I was in New York. She's like, I'm like, how hard can that be? I mean, I've seen it. And she was like, okay, cool. And so she left, and for a week and a half was in Paris, and I became a booker. And I liked it. Meanwhile, I'm still on the roster as a model. So it was like
two sides of the same story.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I never pushed myself, honestly. I was never like, oh, why don't you try this guy? But when in my mind, what it did was I thought, well, this could be a steady income. Mm-hmm. I just thought, I can make a salary. So that would make me feel more stable to think, each week I had this amount of money, or it was just the way my mind worked. So when she came back, we spoke about it, and I said, oh, I think I want to be a booker.
But did you enjoy it the first, weeks?
Yeah. I knew a lot of these guys, so it was really like a family kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it was nice. But I became quite good at it. And then once again, I became much more practical, and I thought, listen, if I'm going to do this and work this hard, it's a women's business. I should open a women's agency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because I thought, I'm not going to... I booked men for maybe a year. I opened women in 1988. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think maybe a year, a little bit more. I was a men's booker. And we had very, very good guys, and we had really top guys. So...
good training.
So anyway, I decided that if I was going to be an agent, then I should work with women, because women make more money. And why am I going to bust my ass working so hard? Because an agent's life it's a lot of work. And so I went to the woman that owned the agency, Nadia, and I said, I think I want to open a women's division. And at that time, we were on 19th Street and Broadway, and we had kind of a big loft. And so there was space. It's so funny how you do things. She was like, oh, okay, just go in there and, we'll get a phone.
Take a table.
Yeah, it was like that. So there was one phone that had, I think, call waiting. Back then, seriously, there was a phone. We went to, I don't know, Conrad's and bought some cheap table. And so that was it. But as we all know, women, it's a much tougher, it's just a whole different beast than men's. I mean, men's, it's a walk in the park. Women's, from finding girls, you know, that, and then just the competition, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, it was a whole nother level of work. And
Because at that time, what were the agencies?
so this is 1988. So at that time, the big agencies in New York was Elite, was like, you know,
Ford?
the monster, Ford. I think, I'm trying to remember if Names was around then. Names was this amazing agency Louise Dupont, this French woman had. Like, it was really one of the first kind of boutique agencies. And it was super incredible. Like, she had, I mean, all those girls. I mean, my favorite agency, if anyone ever asked me, like, what would be your favorite agency, was Click. Click was an agency in New York in the 80s. First, the name. I mean, it's like the camera, like Click. It's genius. Just the word. You know, it was just incredible. And I think they had like Terry Toy at that time, which was the first kind of trans model. Like, she worked with Stephen Sprouse and Mizell and all those people. I mean, they found Elle McPherson, they found Josie Borain, they found, Kim Williams, like the girls that were like editorially, and then they ended up, you know, they really started that whole thing of like these kind of incredible editorial girls that crossed over, that did campaigns and became, you know, they started to do cosmetics. So Elite was really like already kind of this old idea in terms of, you know, the supermodel kind of, you know, like it was Elite, but it was just, things were starting to change. And so Names was around. So I had been working with Storm, with Sarah Dukas, already with men. And we were quite close. And so she said, okay, Paul, I'm going to give you a girl. And I'll never forget this. It was the first girl she gave me, was this beautiful girl called Tabitha Skanes. But I had my best friend, and she worked at Indochine. And at that time, all these girls that worked at Indochine were these kind of incredible Asian girls, like,
Indochine, the restaurant.
Yeah, this is in the late 80s. So it was, and so I had my best friend, her name was Michelle Kwan, Quan. And she looked kind of like a boy. She's Asian, tall, really skinny. And I said, you know, I'm starting this women's agency. Like, you should be a model. Like, and she is an artist. She now has a very kind of great business doing ceramics, and she was just the coolest girl. And, you know, she was like, okay, I was 27 years old. And she was kind of a little bit younger. So anyway, she became a model because we're friends. And she started to do like incredible things. I mean, she started to work straight away. And it's funny because at that time there was a bookings editor at American Vogue, which I will not give the name. That was a real, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember I would try to call to make appointments, you know, like for this girl specifically. I mean, I think I had like 5 girls, you know, for Michelle. And she would never see her. And she always told me, you know, this will never work. Like, you know, like like what you're doing, like, forget it. Like, it's not going to work. And one time she went on holiday for 2 weeks, and I got in touch with, I think, Camilla Nickerson. And I asked her if she could see Michelle. And they saw her, and they loved her, and they booked her while this casting agent was on holiday.
Wow. That's
like a major
more.
Story. No, I'm not like front of the book, like a story in the well. And I was just like, you know, there you go. And so when this bookings editor came back, she didn't know what to do. You know, she really was shocked. Long story short, years later, she became obsessed, of course. You know, it's like that. You know, this
Always like
business.
that.
Well, the problem in fashion, all these people have amnesia, and they don't remember anything until they remember it, and then they always want to think that they were on it from the beginning, and you have to remind them like how no, you were not. And it's okay, you know, like, that's what I always said. Listen, we all get things wrong. Like, it's not, yeah, everyone thinks they have to always get the right thing and get the right girl and they have to be on top of it. And at the end of the day, like, you can't always do that.
It's not science.
And it's okay. Yeah, it's subjective. But what I always felt was, as an agent anyway, I mean, I've had many incarnations, but as an agent, even when I started Women, which was in 1988, the first Vogue Italia cover that Franco Sozzani did, that Stephen shot, myself, that Fabienne Baron was the art director, was a girl from my agency. It was the first year I had opened my agency, in 1988. If you look up the cover, it's Robin McIntosh, and it's the very, very first issue of Franca's Vogue Italia. And I literally had, I think, 5 or 6 girls. And Robin was this incredible girl that was German and Jamaican. And she had this kind of, already this mix, but green eyes and kind of honey skin. And like, I'll show you the cover. So it all kind of happened quite quickly.
Yeah, that's a good start, starting with the Vogue Italia cover in that era.
And at that era, yeah, it was much more impressive than Vogue America. Yeah. Even though, of course, everyone was obsessed with that. Vogue Italia was really the thing in fashion. So I started Women in 1988 with a very good friend of mine. It was just he and I. Like I just told you. And then it grew quite quickly. But when it all really kicked off, probably was when Kate came into the picture, Kate Moss. But at that time, I was already representing a lot of British girls because I worked a lot with Storm and I worked with other people. So I had really kind of amazing, cool, like Emma Balfour was one of my very first girls I was always obsessed with. Cecilia Chancellor was another one. Like, cool. I mean, Emma's Australian, but she lived in England, and David Sims was her boyfriend at that time. And so, but when it became a thing, really, was when I met Kate Moss. And the funny thing about that story is I was never supposed to represent her. I didn't even know about her. Even though I was working a lot with Sarah at Storm, Sarah never told me about this girl. And at that time, there were no girls, as we all know, that were that small. Yeah. So it wasn't even on anyone's radar, you know? So how that happened was Mario Sorrenti was also a model, and he was a model in our men's division, and we were friends. He used to come in and draw in his books and sit and just hang out. And he was starting to do photography.
But his brother was the one doing the photography.
Yeah, David was the one. I mean, the mom always took pictures. You know, he comes from a family of photographers. But he had gone to London to try to work on taking pictures at this time. This is in, I don't know, late 80s. I forget the year. And Kim Sion, who had an amazing agency in London called Smile, was his agent. Anyway, he came back to the US and he and Kate were dating. And Kate went to see, she had already been promised to another agency. So she went to see this agency and she didn't like them. And Mario said, oh, you should come meet my friend Paul, you know, you'll really like him. You know, it was very bad. And she came in and we hit it off like straight away. And she was 15, 16. I'll never forget what she looked like. She had on like this white full-length Vivienne Westwood coat with this big shearling. It was like a shearling, you know, it's very 90s, with like to the floor, and like trainers and like track pants and like a tank top or something. And I met her and I'm like, she immediately just seemed larger than life. Even though she was this tiny little thing, like you just thought, wow, this kid really has something.
She took the room.
And yeah, she took the room, and you know, the thing is, we had never seen any of that before, you know, like it was something very new. But I just liked her, you know, she was very kind of, you know, you know, she just said what she thought. She was very real, but very sweet. Anyway, so I said, oh, you should come and, you know, why not, like, be with us. So that was the early 90s. And then that all, you know, that's kind of history, how that happened. And then women became like women. And
so you like those challenges because, as you said, like this was also like it's not going to happen for her because her being that tiny at the time.
I always loved when people said it can't happen or it won't happen. And I think I was so driven by...
I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, that was my thing. I just thought, really? Like, let's see.
I'm going to make you...
No, and I was, you know, I was definitely driven by anger, too, I think, from when I was a teenager. Like, there were a lot of things pent up in me. And it was also, I was very ambitious. I knew I was put on this planet to do something. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know, but I knew there was something that I needed to do. And so I was just driven by this kind of confidence and kind of brazen, very fuck you kind of attitude. It was very punk rock and like, you know, it was very that, but it's always been that. You know, I mean, everything I've done has been that. It's always been against the grain, not just for the sake of being against the grain, but like, that's just how I was. That's who I am. And I think all the girls I took, and there were a lot of girls I took that never became big, but I was as equally obsessed with them as I was about the ones that became big. I just only took people that really inspired me. And I think because I had such a background in painting, so all the way I saw beauty and how I saw people came from this background of like, you know, paintings of, I don't know, Egon Schiele or Modigliani or Picasso. So I always found faces that were not the new, you know, the classic. I was not interested in like this kind of...
Boring.
Well, I saw them as beautiful, but it was a standard of beauty that was not... They're just people that look so many different ways. And it's what's coming from someone that makes them interesting. It's not... I mean, it's a formula on one hand, but I always felt like the body was much more important than the face in fashion, because if you don't have the right body for clothes, the clothes just don't look good. And so for me, I was more obsessed about that than I was about the face, if that makes any sense. But I was not looking for, you know, even though I love like Christy Brinkley, I loved all those girls, those Swedish girls, but it was, at that time, was not what I was into. And in 2000 is when I opened Supreme.
So you were always head of scouting too? You were like...
It was always my decision in the end.
Okay.
Like, I had people that scout.
Yeah, of course.
But in the end, if I didn't feel it...
No go.
Because I was very good at knowing what my brand was, what I was trying to say, you know, what I was trying to communicate. And I think this is really important. Of course, there would be times agents that worked for me would really like loved someone, which I encouraged. And I'm like, okay, like, let's try, but I don't see it. But I wouldn't do it that often.
Okay.
And even when Eva Herzegovina, I mean, we represented Eva Herzegovina. This is another story of how she was friends with Naomi, And then Naomi said, "Oh, please, you should represent Ava." And she had just stopped doing Wonder Bra and all that shit. And me, I was so not commercial, you know, like I didn't care about money. I mean, I cared, but I was not doing it for the money. I was doing it for, you know, to be inspired. And Ava did not, I mean, but this is the truth. She did not inspire me. But I had a booker that was just obsessed with her. And so, but at the same time, I thought, okay, this could be interesting to try and switch it and change it up. And maybe we can do something, you know, dye her hair brown, not blonde. And it worked in the end. I mean, she worked. I don't even remember this amazing story for the face and cover with Karine Rockfield and Mario Testino, where she looked nothing like how we saw Ava Herzogova before. So that really excited me. The transformation is what always excited me, like transforming girls to something else. Or even in photography, it's always about transforming something into something else. So that was kind of cool. But in the year 2000, women was already like this kind of machine, and we had become a network, which I never planned on doing either. But that's another story. So women, it started to become boring to me because I just felt like this is so boring. Like it's just, you know, it becomes like a formula, and you know, it's a big machine, and that was not exciting me. And I thought, well, now would be a good time to do like a sister agency that is strictly about what I feel is beautiful, or collectively as Booker. And we're not going to compromise anything, because we were already making money, and like I could pay my rent, and you know, so I could literally, you know, money does give you the luxury at some point to just do what you feel. You're not having to compromise to be able to pay a salary. Do you understand?
Of course.
So that was a real luxury. And so I thought, okay, I want to open this agency. And I had an idea of the kind of girls that I wanted. And I wanted them really skinny and really tall and not commercial. I want them all to look the same, but different.
With the edge.
Yeah, they all had to say something, but I just didn't want, I wanted it to look like a tribe, you know. So in the end, all these girls ended up like Suvi and Megan Collison, and I mean, there's tons of them. I can't even remember all of them. There are a lot. But it was about an attitude, and it was about a certain, how do you say, aesthetic? So for me, the girl was this girl that was kind of intellectual, not overtly so beautiful, but like there was something quite interesting. So the faces were always a bit, you know, different. And then that became like a huge thing. I mean, people still scout girls that look like that, which is ridiculous to me. Like no? Am I right or wrong?
Yes, you're 100% right.
You know,
but the aesthetic went through, you know, it's like...
It became something commercial. And at that time, it was really, not that I was not trying to be commercial, I just took what I found to be inspiring.
So how did you brand it? You know, like, I mean, you have this vision, but like how the clients reacted, because...
It was hard. In the beginning, it was, I mean, you can ask Mohammed and Peter and all these bookers. I mean, they worked their asses off. They just pushed these girls, and there were so many no's.
Yeah. So you're back with the no's.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's the struggle that gives you that high of like, I can do this. You know, you feel more alive. When things become too comfortable, you start to just feel kind of, you know, so if you're kind of in it and in the struggle of it, and so when you do achieve something, that achievement is so much more bigger.
Yes.
And I would send girls, all these girls, like to, I don't know, Dolores and Stephen Maisel, and she would always say to me, oh, she's so ugly, this girl. And I'm like, you know what, like, in 6 months, like, you'll be calling me. And more, attention, more often than, it's okay, more often than not, it was the case, Because, but if you look at a show like, or look at what Mucha Prada has done for many years, you see a collection and very few people get it in the beginning. You just think, oh, like, what the fuck? What is that? And then you catch up to it. And that was the same, well, I feel like that was the same at women in the beginning, but like Kate, a lot of girls. But at Supreme, it was just that, And I loved that because you become the style maker. You become the one that is dictating what is happening. Exactly. And that was very cool.
So at that time, you were much more involved in Supreme.
Yeah, at that time I was obsessed with Supreme. I mean, I had, of course, because we had a huge loft.
And like what happened?
No. We were all in the same space.
Okay.
So it was basically like this huge loft on Lafayette, and in one part of it was women, on the other part was Supreme, but it was like two different worlds. And I named Supreme because I knew all those boys that started the skate shop Supreme. And I always loved that. I just thought it was such a cool name. And I thought, and this agency was a bit like that. It was about these kids that were kind of grungy, like a bit rock and roll, a bit gothic. It says, and I think it all comes from when you yourself feel like other your whole life. So
like
what you relate to, exactly, is that. And if you can help bring that into a mainstream thing.
It's like kind of a revenge, like you're the outcast and now you're like the one setting the trend, like the one that the people that maybe were like bashing you wanted to work with you.
Well, also, I mean, I was cutting their hair. I was, I had so many people that hated me. Like, let's be honest.
Models or clients?
Everybody. Because I just did whatever the fuck I wanted to do. I didn't, I mean, I've had major hairdressers say, but you're not a hairdresser. I'm like, no, I'm an artist. And I could do a better haircut than you. And it was the truth. I mean, with a lot of those girls, you see these haircuts. They were like, people like blown away by it, which was so funny to me. Because, and the reason I did that, and the reason I became a photographer was, when you have new girls, it's not like you can call, I don't know, David Sims to take some test pictures. So all these young photographers were not capable to get what I was seeing in my own head. And so it was a waste of time. For me, that was just wasting time. And at that time, I was very good friends with Steven Sprouse, and we were always friends. But I would call him and say, okay, Steven, can you take some pictures of this girl? This is kind of what I want to do. And he's like, yeah, of course. And we would get in the studio and take pictures. But I would be so like an art director, I'd be like, no, it's got to be that, the angle's here. He's like, one day he's like, well, why don't you just take the picture? I mean, you know what you want. And I said, but I'm not a photographer. He's like, no, but you understand. And so that's how I started taking pictures. And
the composition is one of the major things in painting, so you had that background too.
And light and composition. But I've never called myself a photographer. I would never do that. I respect people that know their craft, but at the end of the day, you can technically be great at anything. You could be a great photographer, as a designer, but if you don't have an eye, then you just don't have anything. So I always knew somehow I was gifted with an eye for something. And you just work around that. And in the end, you make it work for you. You understand?
Of course.
So that's kind of how all that, I went from I was never really an agent. I mean, I didn't love being an agent. I don't love talking about money. I don't like any of that. But I was just more of a visual. I visually kind of knew what I saw and what I wanted to project. So I would just get people that would be good at being an agent or be good at being a first assistant to, at a light.
It's part of the eye too, like knowing who the right person.
Yeah.
It's like scouting and everything. Like knowing that this is going to be the right agent for my agency and it's going to be able to deliver part of my vision on the booking part.
And also, I think you just have to be unapologetic about what it is you do. It's very important because it's so easy to let people intimidate you into thinking like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't know. Or maybe, or maybe that isn't right. But at the end of the day, if that is what you genuinely feel and it's authentic to you, you have to go for that and push it. And I really thought this may work, it may not work. I mean, I don't know. And if it doesn't, it's okay. Like I'll find what I'm supposed to do, So I think I approach things in a very different way than maybe a lot of people did. I don't know.
Just because you were not afraid of being wrong or at that point, are you not afraid that, okay, can stop and what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
You've never
it goes back to like, well, I'll find a job. You know what I mean? Like, well, I'll figure out something.
Okay.
Like, I'm not, but I was lucky enough that, it worked for me. And the thing that I feel that has worked for me in my whole life is just listening to my instinct and not being afraid to do what I feel. And, I like to be a bit controversial. I mean, let's
be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest. Like, I like controversy. I like I like to make people think. And, in art, I think what's important for me is in any art form, it's not if you like it or you don't like it. It's more as if you have some response to it. Mm-hmm. You understand?
Yeah, of course. The reaction people get from
it's just a reaction.
Yes.
Because most people don't feel anything. Mm-hmm. So if they're feeling something, then you're
lots of people are numb.
Yeah, or they don't have an opinion, or they don't have a. So I always felt like at least if you have some response, then you're doing your job.
Mm-hmm. And either way.
Either way, whether they hate you. I love the fact that I upset a lot of people. I think it's really good. I think it's good.
So we're going to get all the comments like, oh, this guy.
I don't know where you're going to get it. But I think it's important to just do what you feel is right for you. Maybe.
But stop. Lots of people are afraid of this, I think, nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's easier. It's easier to be in a position where everybody's trying to be liked now.
Yeah, nobody wants to be controversial.
Yeah, it's very.
No, but it's not like I went into something wanting to be controversial. I just was.
Yes.
I mean,
of course.
You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
I mean, look at people that have done things through the years. They were considered controversial because they had a different way of seeing things.
Of course.
And then in the end,
they were right.
I don't think it's about being right or wrong. People connected to it.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to be remembered for something. Mm-hmm. It was something very important to me. Like, I think it's an artist's way of thinking. Like, you want to feel like what you're putting out into the world, you will be remembered. And that can be in a bad way or in a good way, but at least you're remembered. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd never wanted to live in middle America, in the suburbs. I would rather live on the street, poor. Mm-hmm. The whole mediocrity of life has never been something that I've just been petrified about. Because I think I grew up in that. You know what I mean? Like, just not, you want to be seen, for who you are, what you are. You don't have to like it, but you still have to see it. You
I
understand?
think that's something that you have inside of you, wherever you grow, whatever you do, it's like it thrives, like this fire in yourself and this, like, I'm sure I'm going to be someone. I'm sure, like you were saying, I was put on this earth to be someone or to do something.
But everyone is. This is my point.
Yes,
it's not,
of course,
it's not like we're singling out a group of people, but it's just the people who really do it in the end, I think, are people that are super connected to that. Like that is their, you understand? But I think we all have
A purpose.
a purpose. We all have something that is authentically yours that no one else has. And if you're able to tap into that and do that and use it, it's important, And listen, I'm sure a lot of people say a lot of shit about me because I was quiet, I just did what I wanted. At least that was me. You understand? And people don't like that. People don't like when you are you.
Yeah, because they cannot be them. So it's always a reflection that you give to the people. Let's say, like you said, everybody has inner self to be something or someone or whatever. But it's a very few of them who are fearless and are willing to take the risk to, put them out there and, I'm taking the risk.
But what is the risk? See, that takes you, like if you go through that thought, like what are you risking? Are you risking what?
Like failure. People are afraid of failure. I think.
Well, then you can do nothing. You should stay in your home.
Yeah,
if you go out into the world like being afraid of failing, then you might as well not do anything. Yeah, because you understand.
Yeah, I totally understand. But now, with the social media, I think everybody's great. Everybody's successful. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the people too. Meaning like, they're comparing, they're always being this thing. Let's take models, okay? Yeah. They always compare themselves to the success to the other, but they always see it from an outside perspective, But now they're spending their time and they see all their friends or other models doing these things, posting their vacation, their good jobs, and then
you have your agent telling you need to do all of that, right? I mean, yeah. I'm sure that's part of the thing too, like it's part of your business.
Yes, of course. But I mean, like the image it gives to the people watching those stories and those things, it puts, I think, a lot of mental pressure of like, but if I try this and I'm not successful, the people are going to judge me, and this girl is successful, this guy is successful, me, will I ever make it like this, I think it's part of the culture we live in at the moment with the social media.
Yeah, I mean, social media, it's so funny you talk about social media because when Instagram started, I loved the idea of Instagram because, I have I'm an image library because I've been a visual person my whole life. So visually, like, I thought, what an amazing idea that you don't have to talk, which I hate talking really. You can just post images that inspire you. Maybe they inspire someone else, whatever. And then it turns into like a whole,
showcase. That's my line.
Yeah, and even on my own Instagram in the beginning, I just was posting like whatever. And then I think with Instagram, you have to decide what you want to use it for. Like it depends on what it is as a platform. That took me a while to figure out, like, it's a platform, And so now on my own Instagram, it's basically just, I post a lot of vintage images. I post a lot of things from the past because I feel like a lot of people don't know these pictures. Some do, but I feel like for younger people, like it gives people like, oh, wow, what is that? Who is that? Do you understand?
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, in a way. And I thought even as a business-wise, if you want, it's as a creative director or it's as, like research. And I've had many people tell me, oh, you should have your Instagram private because people just go and they see your images and they use them and this and that. I'm like, but you know what? Like, isn't that what it's for? Like, to share? Like, you understand? It's all like how you view your world and what it is you're trying to do with it. You understand?
Yes, of course.
So, but even living in Marrakech, I've had people I was working with 2 companies to help them on their Instagram. And I really don't know, I'm not an Instagram person. You know, like there's a whole art form to how you use Instagram. And I'm not even interested in that. I just post what I like. You know, it's a business. So I think my advice to anyone in a fashion business or any kind of business like that is you should do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Because at the end of the day, that will turn around and it will become something. Because what people look for is something different. They, you know, even though they talk shit about it, that's what they're looking for. You know, if you think about it, all these, you know, people that become something is because they have a point of view that someone else doesn't have.
Yes, of course.
I think, no?
Yeah, 300%.
So I think it's so important to like really go against the grain as opposed to going with it. And in the beginning, sure, it's probably a bit hard. But trust me, in the end, it works. Because if you just become another person doing something, you're just another person. You're not, you're not, like, why would they pick you over you? I mean, you understand? You all do the same. So, okay, maybe your rate's cheaper. Okay, we'll go with you. You understand? Like, so it all depends on why you do things. In the end, your purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it just, you know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
And I don't think, I mean, we can all make money to live and do all of that. You're smart people, we're smart. But it's what you leave behind. It's what people remember you for.
The legacy.
Legacy.
It's really, for me, has always been, I think, the most important thing, you know. And even if it's controversial, I still think that's good, you know.
You're enjoying it, so...
Well, at the end of the day, I feel like I've lived the way I've wanted to live. I've done things the way I've wanted to do it.
It's a luxury, eh?
And it's, yeah, but anyone can do it. Everyone seems to think it's a luxury. I think people are just afraid to do it.
Yeah.
But you are right, in a way. Some people have no clue what they
Yeah.
believe in, what they don't, what they think is beautiful, what they don't find is beautiful. That's why they need people that says, no, this is what's beautiful. This is what's, and then they're like, oh, wow, maybe you're right, you know? I mean, that happened to me so many times all the time. And people would be like, but they start to trust you and they start to trust your judgment and they start to think, okay, well, I don't get it, but if he thinks it is, I mean, your track record starts to.
Yeah.
So they, and that's how you make influence and change and things.
By talking about the trends, you know, setting the trends.
Yeah, in anything, you know, just having some kind of a conviction about something.
So do you consider you set a trend with Supreme when you launched it?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, I wasn't thinking that at the time. I was just thought, I think this is really cool. And I think it was very New York. It was a real, like, fuck you kind of thing. It was against everything. And I really loved that because I thought, you know, it's important to do things different. And I was not shocked that it became successful either. I just thought...
I think a lot of people thought it would never be successful, like commercially wise. I mean, like...
No, but it was. A lot of those girls still work
Yeah.
to this day and are considered,
Yeah,
you know, big models. You know, do they have like major cosmetic contracts? I don't know. Probably not.
They would never have anyway, so, you know.
No, but that was not the point. But they ended up having amazing careers and they made good living and they inspired designers and they inspired photographers. I mean, it perpetuated fashion and it set different trends of things. So it's not always about, you know. I mean, Carolyn Murphy, you know, she just came to my head. I mean, she was 16 when she came to me, and she was this little girl from, like, I don't know, some little town in Florida. And she did not look like that, you know. And I thought, I was not even sure. And I thought, let's just make a test and see what she looks like. And it was like those girls that you see them and then you see them on film and it's like something completely different.
It's crazy.
You know?
Yeah.
So everybody comes from somewhere and ends up going somewhere. And you just have to have the eye to know what can work and what doesn't work. You know?
Real time. So considering how, like the evolution of women and then evolution of Supreme, what was your next challenge?
Oh, well, Ford was like, okay, so I I haven't even talked about that.
If you don't want to talk about it, we can spoil for us.
No, I completely. So what happened was, what year was that? 2013?
Yeah.
No, 10. 2010. Supreme had been for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Okay, so what happened was, I had a business partner. My investor, who I loved, was with an agent, which I won't say, from Milan, that, anyway, it was part of the package. And I really loved my investor. He's not here anymore, you know. Anyway, long story short of that was, they wanted to do more than me what do you call it? Like a network. Me, women was always just New York. It was never, I was from New York. It was my job, it was very cool. But they, when you start to get investors with money, they see other things. And, I thought, okay, maybe this could be cool. Like, I hadn't made that much money up until that point, and I thought, why not, maybe that's cool, Anyway, it became a network. But the investor and I got along well, but my business partner and I had very, very different ways of thinking. And Katie Ford had contacted me like twice over 2 years and asked me to meet with them. And Ford at that time, her mom wasn't there anymore, and it was Katie, and, it was just there, Ford. And so I met with Katie Ford once, just to have lunch. And it was like, okay, whatever. We had lunch. And then Jean-Michel, who had Ford in Paris, who was my friend, a year later, around 2010, contacted me and said, Ford sold to these Russian hedge fund guys, and they really want to meet you. And at that time, at Women in Supreme, I think I felt like I didn't need to leave anywhere, but I just was at another plateau. Supreme was already like...
Yeah, that's why I asked about
Yeah, so I was like, why not? I always loved the name Ford, and I always loved the brand, and it was such an incredible brand. I thought, how interesting that could be, because at that time, designers were starting to do that, taking a designer from somewhere and putting them in a bigger house, and, and I thought, well, why can't it be the same in an agency? And I loved the idea of changing Ford into something that was more modern. But I was, at the same time, petrified to do it. So I thought, I'm not sure I want to do this. So I met with the owner, and I thought, I'm going to just ask for so much money that they're going to say no. Seriously, that was my thinking. I thought, I just am going to ask a number that, I just made up a number. And I thought, I'm going to ask, and I'm sure he's going to say, yeah, right,
And that way.
And that would be it. And then at least I did my thing.
Yeah.
And I remember, he was like some really wealthy, and I made him meet me in the East Village, like at some cafe. I just was really like...
You're playing the...
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? Like, this is me. Anyway, I go in this meeting, and he's like, okay, so what do you want? He goes, we really want you to do this. So I asked for the number. And he just didn't flinch. He was like, okay. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, now what am I going to do? But I was super excited, too, because I thought, you know what? You're only as worth as much as you feel you're worth. You understand what I mean?
Definitely.
Like, it was a real kind of light switch moment for me. Because I thought, know your value.
Yeah, you put your own price tag.
Yeah, like, know what you're worth. Know what, don't be afraid to ask for it. And it was one of those moments, and it worked. And then I said, well, if this were to happen, I would need to bring, because there's people that had been with me forever.
Yeah.
And I need to bring them with me. And, okay, how much does that cost? And, I doubled the salary. And, there was just no, that was the crazy thing about working at Ford. There was no budget.
No limits.
And I've never in my whole life been in a situation like that. It was literally like that. And I was like, okay, but, I don't want to be in Ford's offices downtown. It's just this huge factory. If you really want to bring your image up, you're going to have to completely change. No problem. I found this office up on 59th and 6th Avenue, the penthouse. And the reason for that was Eileen Ford started in a townhouse on 57th Street on the east side. She was that kind of woman. So it made sense to me that and all those agencies had come downtown.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is what needs to happen. So, sure enough, we got this office, and it literally, because 59th Street is just the power street.
Yeah.
And we were literally on the corner with wraparound terraces on 2 floors that looked onto Central Park and all the way down 59th Street.
Wow.
No, 57th Street. And it was intoxicating. But, so I left women. That was a real, and I thought, you know what, if you're going to leave a place, leave at the top. Don't leave going down.
Going down, of course.
And no one will ever expect this, nobody. And it was crazy because people were they didn't know what to think. Because I was women and I was supreme.
Right. Even in terms of structure, you were the founders.
Yeah, and I was at that point there were 3 of us that was shareholders. But I thought, you know what? Why not? Go for it. And so I did. And then that lasted. So I had a contract with Ford. I signed a contract for 3 years. And in my mind, I thought, you know what? After 3 years, I want to move to Morocco. We had already, for some years, thought about moving to Morocco, and I had kids by then, and they were little, and I thought, you know what, I don't want them to grow up in New York City. So this was already in my head, I'm going to make a lot of money, and, blah, blah, blah. But at that time, so I got fired from Ford, and the thing was, for almost 10 years had a very bad back. I have 2 dislocated discs in my lower back. So I have had a lot of problems with my back. And I had become very addicted to painkillers.
Okay.
So I had a very big addiction to painkillers. And so I was but at the same time, I was still doing an amazing, let's be honest, how many years I've been in the fashion business, how many people I've done blow with, how many times I've done, it was normal. Yeah. You understand? Especially in the late 80s, 90s, everybody was partying. It was not, and me, I was never really hiding anything. It was just, but this was something totally different. All of that, I kind of got clean from doing a lot of drugs, but this was just because I had a very bad back, and if you've ever had any of this, you understand, like, it's a highly addictive
Yeah.
drug.
Yeah.
But it was just strictly because I was in a lot of pain. But then it just escalated. So in the end, that's what they used against me. I mean, whatever. Like, that was what it was. And Ford was a very weird thing because it was great in the first year or a year and a half, and then I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. It just became very dark. And a lot of that had to do with me, but it also had to do with, you know, when you feel like things are kind of cursed in some weird way?
Yes.
Like, it was that. Even though we had a lot of girls that came there, and that they were billing a lot of money, you know, of course, the image and everything I was doing was quite risque for Ford, but I felt like I really wanted to, like, you know, once again, like, push this envelope. And yeah, so I got fired like 2.5 years in. And they kept me on a, how do you say, like a non-compete?
Non-compete, yeah.
For 1.5 years. So they paid me my salary. And so the blessing in all that was really, I went to rehab because it was very hard to get off of this medication for a month. And I kicked that. And I spent it gave me time for once to spend with my family because I just worked all the time. And I've never been fired ever from any job. It was very bizarre. You know, I'm not gonna lie. I felt very like, what is happening? And two, you think you're this, like, you know, invincible, like, I'm just the shit, you know, like, are you kidding me? You know, so it was on many levels, it was very good for me. It was
Grounding,
very kind of grounding, maybe a bit humbling, but it also helped me, give me time to take care of myself and reevaluate. So,
because you've been in this train since you left.
oh yeah,
It was like,
no, since I was like 14, I've been on that train.
Yeah.
You know, just like full steam ahead, and yeah, so it all kind of.
because when you're in the system, you know, you never take time, and especially in this industry with like very time consuming, you never take the time to look in the back and think about yourself, and especially you're not really an agent, but like even with your position, you're always like pressure from the clients.
On you.
Yeah, always rely
At the
on
end
you.
of the day, it's my head.
Yes, of course. It's lots of responsibilities towards people's.
Yeah, and also towards people's expectation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, it's one thing to become successful, it's another thing to stay there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and to stay there consistently. And, you know, as we all know, it's a really hard thing to do. And so I think it was probably a blessing in disguise, maybe. At the time, it obviously didn't seem like it. But it really changed the trajectory of kind of my life, I think, in a good way. And so we stayed in New York, I don't know, 2 years maybe. We lived in Brooklyn. And then we came, Salim he was 5 and Zaid was 3. So we came for the summer to Morocco.
Yeah.
And we had an apartment here. And Mohammed and I both, we didn't have a job. We didn't know what we were going to do. You know, I was like, I don't know. Like, people offered, oh, you know, let's open another agency, this and that. And I just thought, dude, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that anymore. I've done it. I don't need to do it. I've got to think of. And so nothing was really happening. So we said, you know, we'll come here for the summer. If nothing, by the fall, we own a house we still have in Brooklyn, and we'll just stay. And that's what we did. We never even told the kids that we were staying. They just thought we were kind of on this long holiday. And then we put them into like the French school, and they didn't know French at all. I mean,
Interesting.
no. I mean, they were like New York City kids.
Yeah.
And they learned French super fast. So they've been in the French lycée since, because it's better than the American school.
Yeah.
It's a better system. So, and we've been here now almost 8 years in Marrakech. And I don't miss New York at all, which is weird because I thought I'm going to definitely have withdrawals because I was always a New Yorker. You know, for me, like that's how I identified, that's who I am. But at the same time, I felt I was also like a gypsy, like I can be okay anywhere. But I was so, you know, New York was a huge part of my existence. But I literally was like, I didn't even, it was weird. I think because I did everything I was supposed to do there. So it was kind of a closed.
End of a new
cycle.
Closed cycle in my life.
And ever since, have you been involved in fashion, or did you just like got behind?
Well, I worked with my friend Carol White, who owns Premier in London. A couple of years ago, she asked me if I wanted to like help her. So I did kind of a consultancy with her. Like I would go and kind of do kind of show packages or find girls and do pictures. And then that stopped. No, I still love fashion. I mean, you know, I'm not opposed to anything. I'm very open to things. But I have not sought anything out, really. You understand?
Yeah.
And at some point, too, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not as relevant. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, but I'm being honest about things, you know? Like, I'm not I don't live in the past. You know, I don't live in sit on my laurels of what I was, what I did. I mean, the great thing about living in Morocco has been, it's just given me time to be with my kids and, you know, at an age where growing up, like, you know, that you really need to be with them. You know, I mean, it's hard when you're a working parent and all you do is work. You don't.
Yeah, you sacrifice.
You know, and in New York, you're working all the time, so you have a nanny, you have this and that. And so when we moved here, I was like, there's none of that. We're going to do all of it. You know, like we're going to. And so that's what I've been doing, basically. But to answer your question, I love fashion and I love that industry. It's in my blood. So if something came along that was interesting, why not? Why wouldn't I do it? You know, I still feel I have a lot to say.
Sure.
And I feel like, you know, once you have, it's here, it's there.
Yeah, it stays.
And I think, no, but it's like what I was saying to you. At this point, I could open I'm not opening an agency, just so you understand.
Is that an announcement?
No. But I'm sure I could kill it because I just have that thing that I know what can work and what doesn't work. Even though people say, oh, but it's very different now, and da, da, da. It's always different. But at the end of the day, darling, what you're looking for is this. You know, what we look for is what's inspiring. And that never has changed from the beginning, and it will never change. Maybe how you get to something can be different.
Yeah.
But it's still the same in a way.
So
Do you agree or no?
Yeah, I do. But I was about to say, you're not the type of person who's saying like fashion was better before. You know what I mean? Like nostalgic.
That's ridiculous. Fashion is always about change. And no. I mean, I remember Polly Mellon said to me once, Polly Mellon, who was an amazing editor, and already at this time, she was probably almost 60, and she said, I never think in the past. It's always about the future. Fashion is about, you know, because fashion is what, you know, it's a language that kind of reflects what's happening in your world, what's happening now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can reference things in the past, but it really has to be about how it's connecting to now.
100%.
On another subject, like you now living in Marrakech and in an Arabic country, we were having the discussion last week about the lack of representation of Arabic models, male and women. But
Why do you think that is?
Me, I got my own opinion, and I got interviewed about it. I think that for women, some people seeing like booking an Arabic woman is like making a political statement, like, oh, I agree with, especially with what's happening in France, you know, it's like, oh, I'm okay with like what an Arabic country could stand for, let's say hijab or whatever, you know, they see really this booking, like, oh, I'm booking this Moroccan model. We were talking with Malika El Mausli, who's a good friend of ours. And that's really the feeling that they're afraid of touching it because of the repercussion it could have or whatever. You know, that's the
On
feeling
the brand or
on the even magazines, you know, and I think they're kind of afraid of touching it, you know.
Yeah, but you know, I have two trains of thoughts on this.
Okay.
The first one being, I remember girls coming to me and saying, oh, but I'm a little overweight, but you know, I'm sure they can make it work. And I always go to, darling, it's not about them making something work. It's about you. It's like an athlete. If you can't do your job, then you shouldn't be doing it. And I feel the same about models. It's like the whole inclusion thing, I get it, but at the same time, I opened a magazine when I was 15 because I wanted to dream. I didn't open it to see something real. This is me.
Yeah,
okay?
but why an Arabic
Well, let me
woman
finish.
couldn't
I'm
be
not
a dream?
finished. Let me finish. No, you're not letting me finish. So what I'm saying is there is a certain criteria in anything. I'm going to get to your point, but the point I'm making is there is, for instance, if I'm a designer and my clothes are, you know, I agree it's a bit ridiculous the sizes they make them, but that's what's their vision, and that's what it needs to look like. So you need to fit in that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. To your point, beauty can come from anywhere. I'm not like, you know, it's just whatever I find to be beautiful. And I think with Arabic culture, it's complicated because living in a Muslim country, there's the religious background, there's the family background, there's all the things that, it's not just about what they look like. It's not about wearing a headscarf or not. There's a whole cultural side to it that it's a very complicated.
But same with some African countries. They are not from there.
No, and if a family is cool with it, and if a model is cool with it, it's amazing. But that's not, you know. So my point is, if you're scouting in Muslim
maybe it's going to be more complicated.
It's worth
But
it.
still.
Sure, it's worth it. 100%. But at the same time, you know, if you can't go to a job and not have to wear a headscarf, that's a problem. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm not talking about even girls wearing hijab. I'm talking about like regular girls, like could be like in a
like just a modern.
Yeah, just like
No, I mean, why is that a problem?
because we were talking and like there was like 800 guys at the men fashion week just a couple weeks, like 2 weeks ago, and there was like lots of like multiculturalism, black boys, Asian boys, everything, but there was only 3 Arabic boys out of 800.
But do you feel that's a racist thing, or do you feel it's?
I don't know if it's a racist thing. I think that people are not making.
Well, darling, you want to
effort.
talk about France? I mean, we can talk about it. You know,
About what?
Well, I mean, the whole colonial mentality.
I think it's part of the
you know,
European
you
culture.
have Moroccan people who are, you know, and I've lived in this country now for a while, and you observe it, and it's just my take. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, of course.
But you have people born in France that, or it could be Moroccan, Tunisian, whatever. They're French. They pay tax. They're born and raised, but they're still treated as if they're not French.
Of course.
And then they go to their country,
Yeah, and same thing.
it's the same thing. But the reason it's the same thing, because most Moroccan people are very open and welcoming and warm people. But when you come and you have a chip on your shoulder that you are French, but you're Moroccan, and a lot of them are super arrogant and very aggressive and just not nice.
Yeah.
So how do you expect people to welcome you?
Yeah,
You want to be, so you're kind of like this displaced people.
Mm-hmm.
You become like not welcome in your own country where you're born, but in the country of your origin, you feel you're not welcome there either.
It's a tough, yeah.
So I think it's a very tough.
But this has nothing to do with fashion, because if you take the exact same thing in the US, if you're black, you have like barely any connection to your like country of origin, and it doesn't stop you. Like you still have this complicated identity and relationship to your background, but still like people book you. So it has nothing to do with that to me.
So why do you think it's an issue? I'm just asking.
I don't know. If I knew, I
You don't know.
would do something to fix it.
What do you
I don't
think?
know.
I think there's a fear. To me, it's kind of a fear, and like, I don't know, maybe it's time for some key people like with an Arabic background to push like some people in the industry the couple of years with the Black Lives Matter momentum, push the industry to book more than 2 black models,
No, but then you did that. You do. I mean, Yves Saint Laurent always championed
Yes.
Arabic beauty. There are certain designers, as the dean. I mean, he was Tunisian, but it's not a given. I
No,
understand
of
what
course.
you're saying, and obviously it's taking. I don't know. I think it's complicated for people. I don't know why. I mean, the sad part for me is you just can't see someone for being who they are.
Exactly.
It's not about where you're from.
Yes, of
or
course.
the culture, or and being someone that, I mean, my father was very white, blue eyes. My mother's Hawaiian, was dark. So I grew up in a white family. Like no one in my school looked like me.
Yeah.
There were no Asians in the South. I think there were maybe a few. You were either black or white.
Yeah.
So I've always grown up having to kind of. That's why when I got to New York, it was such a relief, because you see such a mix of people. So you start to feel like, oh wow, like, I'm represented here.
I'm part of something.
But I think with Arabic people, I think I don't know. I mean, people, it's already too complicated for them in their minds, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. It was just a
No,
question.
I think it's
that's something that's really, on our mind lately, having an Arabic background and
Are you Arabic as well? From where?
Algeria.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, do you feel, well, then maybe it's something that you have to, I mean, it's something
yeah,
close to
that's
you.
what we're thinking of doing, to be honest.
right.
Yeah, that's a discussion we're having with all the people, having this background and trying to push like
And again, like what we're saying is not book them because they're Arabic, but just
Right.
like
Yes,
do
of
not
course.
not book them because they're Arabic. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Which is a huge difference for me.
But do you feel that happens?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in it. Well, and I think in France, it's probably even worse.
Yeah, we're talking mostly about French, but now, let's be honest, now the whole industry goes through France, There have been era where New York was on top of the game now, because I think that lots of people from the industry are based or spend so many time in Paris, and Paris been back like the capital of the world of fashion. To me, that's how I see it at the moment. And I think that France has this kind of problem with their relationship with their old colonies and stuff like that. So I think that's what's frightened to
Not
to
much
some
has
people.
changed. And when you live in a country like this, you see it.
Yeah.
I'm around a lot of expats, and, it's crazy. Like how it's so crazy that Because it's a learned mentality, you
Yes.
know, it's how you're, even if you don't want to be that way, it's ingrained in you for so, you know what I mean, centuries and centuries. So it really is something that is so hard to
Disconnect.
to change. Not everyone, obviously, but it's more so than one would think. And, you know, I mean, when I was in New York, like it's, people will say this isn't true, but listen, I was in this business for so long. Girls who, maybe now it's changed a bit, but girls who ended up on certain covers, there's a certain formula to what sells, right? And generally it's light-haired, light-eyed, you know, it's a white world. I always said that. I mean, I grew up, you know, like, let's be honest, it's a white world. Even to this day, it's better, but it's still a white world, no? And that's what we all have a struggle with. And we all have to be honest about, because it is how it is. And so you individually or me have to decide how important that is to you in order to champion whatever it is that you want to champion. You understand? And as we've said through this interview, it's so much easier to take the road that's easier than to take the one that's more difficult.
Not our character though, so we'll go the
Well,
other.
that's my point.
Yeah.
So it's all what you want to be remembered for, which is always kind of what I go back to. And yeah, so I think for you guys, it makes a lot of sense because it is something very personal for you.
It is.
And it's something important. And it's great.
Yeah.
But it's, but you know, at the end of the day, though, models, like if we're talking about models, what I was talking about earlier about the criteria, there's a height, there's a body type, there's this. If you have that, you already have a big part of it. The rest is you have to really use your connections and you have to push like hell and for something. And at some point, it will happen. It does happen. It just is.
Pushing, it's always pushing. You know,
Everything
like,
is pushing in that business. That's
No,
it's
yeah.
exhausting.
When do you ever pull?
When do you ever just receive anything? You know what I mean? Like, really, right?
We're having this discussion where, like, I was saying nothing that I had in my life, like, I didn't went and took it. You know, nothing came like, oh, this is for you, but just
No.
get it. Doesn't happen. That's all.
And it's never a thank you. It's never, you know, it's a, in a weird way, it's a sadistic, thankless job
100%.
that is only meant for certain people.
But you know what you were saying about being high with the success? That's, you know, the counterpart of the sadistic relationship to our work. You know, it's like, okay, I made it through. You know, it was hard, it was tough. We were the only one believing in it. But when you make it through, you get something that makes you forget all this struggle that you've been through, in my opinion, you know, to make it happen. And you just start again, like in a new journey. That's my...
Yeah, and you have, you know, listen, people need you to stand up for them because they can't do it themselves. You know, you understand? Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're in a position to be able to do that, I think it's your responsibility, not you, anyone's responsibility. Like for me, you know, to take girls that I knew they were not the classic idea of beauty, but they were beauty. And it's how I saw beauty.
In your eye.
You know, and I made other people, I didn't make, a lot of people agreed, but I offered it. It's like, oh, wow, like, you know, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Put it out there.
So it's important to really champion your convictions and stick to them.
Yeah.
And it may never happen. Who knows? It may,
Of course.
but
You've tried.
Yeah.
you at least at the end of the day feel like you did what you could do. You know?
Yeah, I think that's a very nice note to end this conversation on. Unless you have something else to say or add.
I'm exhausted.
It was really an honor to have you on our podcast.
No, please. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for taking your time and taking...
Well, I'm sorry it's so hot, but
it's all right.
you should have worn your bathing suit. You could have jumped in.
Thank you.
Thanks.